Hello, this is Kyle, also known as AlienTude, reviewing today this Romance of Men AB katana. Now that name, AB, means shrimp or lobster in Japanese, and that is the theme of this katana overall, carried throughout all the Koshirae, and the saya has some inspiration there as well. So why a shrimp or lobster theme? Well, as Romance of Men explains on their listing, there's a number of meanings and symbolism to shrimp and lobster in Japanese culture, whether it's auspiciousness, good fortune, vitality. There's a lot of symbolism to that creature, and that's why they wanted to put it into this katana. If you are interested in buying one of these, they sell brand new for $350. I have a link in the description. There's no tracking on that link that lets you know that I referred you or anything like that, so I don't get any kickbacks. Two disclaimers before we get into this review, and actually, if I'm doing disclaimers, let's make that three. So the first one, I am not a student of Japanese swordsmanship, which is very obvious when you see me use this sword. Second is that this is a review sample sent to me by Romance of Men. I did not pay anything for this katana. If you think that makes me biased, at least you know ahead of time. Lastly, you're going to see a few nicks on the edge and maybe on the surfaces of the blade. That is 100% not the fault of this katana or Romance of Men. I was doing some photography outside. I had the katana placed about 5 feet off the ground in a nice spot for a good photograph. And unfortunately, it wasn't stable enough. And it fell 5 feet directly onto rocks. 100% my fault. The blade took a very small bit of damage. These are all bits that could be cleaned up very easily. The only other thing that I noticed is that the blade side seppa came loose a little bit. Again, 100% my fault, not the fault of the katana. Let's talk about the saya for a minute. So the first thing I need to say is I can't really talk about the fit, because with the weather change where I live, it goes from very hot to relatively cold quite quickly, and that kind of wreaks havoc on wood core scabbards. And this is no exception. When I first got it, it drew nicely, it sheathed nicely. Now it sticks a little bit, and I can't quite get it all the way into the saya. And I had to use a little bit more force than I would have liked to remove it. I can't blame Romance of Men here, because this is something I've noticed as a pattern for all of my swords, except for a few really well-made scabbards. In general, the fit changes as the season changes. So let's talk about the rest of this, though, because there's a lot going on with this saya that you wouldn't really see without me pointing them out. First off, the shape, there's more dimension to this shape than most Longchuan saya. Most of them are pretty much one uniform thickness and width and have very little dimension to it. This is more of a teardrop shape. It's wider up on the mune side and definitely thinner down on the the edge side. And it is more slender overall. It has some taper in all dimensions out towards the end, which is a nice thing to see because it reduces the weight of the saya, and it's also just more traditional. This design on here is hand painted. Now, it's not my favorite design. I know the red is supposed to be indicative of a lobster or shrimp when they're cooked. However, Romance of Men also offers a completely different hand-painted saya with this sword. And take a look at this one. That is really, really nice. Now, unfortunately, I don't have that one. I have this one. Although, that's not to say this is bad or ugly. It's just not really to my taste. I would say if you're going to buy one of these, get that beautiful hand-painted one, though. But besides all that, the kojiri, the kurigata, and the koiguchi are all made from buffalo horn, and it's really nice-looking horn. There's some detail to it and depth to it that really looks nice. The sageo is a pretty thick one, and I think this is cotton. I've left it in the presentation not because I like the aesthetic for this entire katana. It's got a little bit different of a knot, though. This crossover right here is a little bit different than I've typically seen on presentation knots. What I'll say is not the biggest complaint, but there is, if we look inside the koiguchi here, you can see some glue on the mune side of the katana. And I don't like that. You really don't want glue there. It should be wood within the horn koiguchi. So I don't remember seeing that when I first got it. I think the weather change, like I mentioned for the fit, might have caused that to leak out a little bit. I'm not sure, but it's not ideal to have it in there. And the entire shaping there, while the shaping is nice, the final finish of the koiguchi could use to be improved a little bit. Let's take a look at the sword itself and start with the Tsuka, the Koshirae, the entire hilt section before we get to the blade. All of the different Koshirae are made of brass, which is a good material. It's relatively strong, but not being so hard that it would potentially damage the blade. The ito is real silk, which is a very nice touch to have. Most budget Longchuan swords you get, katana, are going to have a cotton or a fake silk. This is real silk, and it feels great. I really like the feel of it. There is hishigami used in this wrapping, and you can see little bits of that paper peek out here and there. So it is legitimately put in there. And the wrap is tight. It's not the tightest wrap I've ever seen, but it is very tight, especially at this price point. This is an excellent tightness for this price point. I can displace the knots a little bit, but they basically don't deform at all. And I have an excellent grip when I hold the sword. That's an outstanding job, in my opinion, by Romance of Men. Both the Fuchi and Kashira have the shrimp or lobster theme going on, and the casting quality on these is pretty decent, a little bit better than I've seen typically from Romance of Men. It doesn't have the casting lines anywhere near as visible as a lot of budget swords. The transitions from the Ito wrap to the Fuchi are rough. They're pretty good on the Kashira, but there's big ledges on both sides of the Fuchi because the Fuchi is just, frankly, a little bit big for this Tsuka core. This is something that really could use to be cleaned up. You really want to have it a smooth line from the Fuchi, and then the Ito wrap line up perfectly with that. It creates a much better aesthetic flow, and it reduces the possibility of there being hot spots to catch your fingers. Now, these ones, I have not had any discomfort from them, but it is something that I think Romance of Men could take a little bit more attention to, especially because this sword is at the higher end of their price range, and it is definitely going for aesthetics. And this kind of detracts from that aesthetic. It really does, you really do want that nice smooth line. The Minuki continue the lobster or shrimp theme, and they stick out from the Tsuka core a little bit more prominently than I typically see on budget katana. It does not cause any kind of issues, for me at least. It's right where my fingers grip the sword. I don't notice that that really affects my grip at all, but it doesn't detract from the grip. So that's the most important thing, in my book at least. The Samegawa here is real. It is panels, and you can see where they are laid onto the Tsuka core. There's a bit of a line right here. It would be nice to see them inlaid into the Tsuka core, but there are compromises no matter what when you're looking at this price point. The Samegawa itself is a pretty decent looking set of panels. There's some variation in the nodule size. There's no emperor nodes or even large nodes, but there's some small and medium ones there. Overall, it looks nice. Overall, the entire hilt looks very nice, except for this kind of glaring flaw in the lineup of the Ito to the Fuchi. I think the overall aesthetics actually work really well here. The Tsuba, again, is a shrimp or lobster theme, and there is one thing that could be improved a little bit here, and that's the seppa stick out into the holes on the Tsuba. There really could use to be solid piece of metal there for them to rest on, just to make it look a little bit more intentionally designed. It's not really a big problem, just a little bit of aesthetics that could be improved. The overall look is quite nice. There's a lot of detail to it, and there's even detail on the actual rim of the tsuba, which is not very common on budget katana. The habaki has quite a bit going on visually speaking. Romance of Men likes to put a little bit more ornate habaki on their katana, and this one is no exception. There's some designs carved into it, or probably cast into it, and this, I believe it's a mon, displayed on it. I don't really know what it means. Now, there is some room for improvement in this habaki. While the fit to the blade is decent, it shows two things that are entirely too common on budget katana. And that's a cutout in the bottom of the habaki for the blade, for the edge to go in. And then on the top, on the mune, the blade stands above the habaki. In a traditional katana made in the traditional manner, the habaki stands above the mune a little bit, and that way when you're drawing and sheathing the sword, it's rubbing on the habaki, not on the blade. In this case, it's rubbing on the blade, not the habaki. And that glue I mentioned in the saya, I think has left a little bit of spotting stains on the habaki here. You can see them right here. And now it's time to talk about the business end, the blade. As always, here's my measurements. You can see that the blade features good distal taper and overall is right in line with what you expect in terms of the specs of a katana. It is made of T10 steel. It is differentially hardened. It has a grass hamon, and it has Romance of Men's aesthetic polish included on that. And you can really tell all that because it is a very striking blade. The hamon is very prominent, very nicely done. It is most certainly acid enhanced, but that's to be expected at this price point. The overall shape is very nicely done. There's some definite profile taper starting a little bit wider at the base, getting a little bit more narrow towards the tip. And the yokote here is geometric, so it does actually change shape there. And you can actually see that the hamon curls around the tip and moves back onto the mune, which is the correct way, as I understand it, for a hamon to really make sure the tip is nice and hard. So overall, it's a beautiful blade. I really do like the look of it. The hamon is nicely done and really pops in bright light and little light. It's very prominent, very nice looking. If we look down the surfaces of the blade, feel the spine, all that, no rippling at all. Bravo on that. That's shows a lot of attention to detail and really getting this sword, getting the aesthetics of the sword really locked in and nailed down. If we look at the blade geometry, there is no niku here. It's just one smooth, straight bevel from the shinogi ji to the edge. And that shinogi ji is very nice and straight, no real wavers anywhere. Romance of Men lists this as extra sharp, and it is. It is a very, very sharp katana. I believe they intended it to be shaving sharp. I wasn't quite able to get it to shave any hair, but you don't really need that. This sword is very, very sharp as is. All right, cutting. And we'll probably just go ahead and merge handling into here as well. But let's start with cutting. Does this sword cut nicely? I put, my normal typical water bottle targets. I have light water bottles, some harder water bottles, some a paper cup, a paper milk carton, and then just a milk jug. And this sword cut through them all very nicely. Very easy to get clean cuts. I got one completely silent on this small water bottle, which is saying something because my stand is rapidly shrinking in size. I've done a lot of damage to it from hitting it multiple times with a variety of swords. I really frankly need to replace it. But there's not a lot of room on there for a bottle to slide around a little bit. So to get a silent cut on a small water bottle at this point is actually really difficult because it's not a particularly great surface anymore. So that's to say, this sword can deliver some outstanding cuts. It cut through the paper targets very cleanly. That's something that if the sword is not sharp enough, it will not cut through the paper. It will tear through the cut. So you really have to, I really look at the remnants of the target to see how it did. And this was very smooth, clean cuts. In addition, this is a fast sword. It is easy to keep it moving, to deliver cut after cut after cut, and just overall a lot of fun to move around. Now, it doesn't really, for me, deliver pretty much any sword wind. I couldn't get it to deliver any for me. But I don't really feel like it needs to because it's really easy to lock it in the hand and deliver good edge alignment with proper technique. When my technique is off, like the very last cut on the milk jug, my edge alignment was off at that point, and that's why it knocked the target off the stand. But with the shape of the Tsuka, with the nice ito, the silk ito, it really does lock the sword in my hand, so edge alignment is easier with this sword. So with the sword weighing in around 2.5 pounds, it is balanced, right around there. And it is very fun to move around, light, without being too light, a good amount of blade authority, good tip control, just really nails what I want out of a fun katana. It's not a big, heavy katana that's going to do a lot of work for you in delivering power. But with the edge, it's going to do you favors in the cutting because it is, again, a very sharp sword. Now, because it doesn't have really any niku, because it has a very sharp edge, it's not going to be good at hard target cutting. It's going to, it just wouldn't stand up to that. It's not really designed for that. This is definitely much more of an aesthetic sword and then a light target cutting sword. Tatami, it would definitely handle it very well. With the lack of niku, it probably would be a little bit less forgiving in delivering cuts on tatami if your edge alignment's a little bit off, or if you have just like a really bad cut. I could definitely see this bending a little bit because of that. That's pretty much a feature of differentially hardened swords, that if you deliver a lot of impact at a bad angle, they're going to bend some. So overall, a fun sword to move around, a fun sword to just do practice swings with. Maybe not the best sword for helping you determine your edge alignment, but a very good sword for helping you maintain your grip, and a lot of fun for light target backyard cutting. So bottom line, this sword retails for $350. What do you get for that price? Well, there's a lot of features on this sword. You've got real silk ito, you've got hishigami, you've got a very coherent theme that is competently done, although the fuchi could use to be shrunk down to fit the overall size of the Tsuka a little bit better. You've got a absolutely gorgeous blade with a beautiful hamon, an aesthetic polish, and a very sharp edge. And a saya that is definitely has a bit more attention to the size and shape and feel than a lot of budget katana. Is it worth $350? Let's take that as, what do you want out of your katana? If you're primarily looking for aesthetics and these aesthetics work for you, then absolutely this is worth it. This is a very well executed katana at an affordable price. It's not nearly as inexpensive as some others you can get. Romance of Men gets down to 120, 150, something like that. So you can certainly get something much less expensive, but with the amount of features this katana has, that starts getting a little bit trickier. Now, there's not a bunch of interesting geometry on the blade. There's no bohi at all, but you've got that aesthetic polish, that extra sharpness, this really beautiful hamon. So there's a lot to like here. There's some things that could be improved. There's always things that could be improved. But for the price of $350, if the aesthetics of this really appeal to you, if you want a backyard cutter that is very sharp for light targets, I think you could do a whole lot worse than this at this price point. So yes, I do think this is worth the $350. I would say, though, if the silk is not important to you, if the hishigami is not particularly important to you, if this specific aesthetic doesn't really catch you, which is totally understandable, then take a look around Romance of Men's website. Maybe you'll find something else that you really like perhaps the Surudoi. I reviewed that katana a while back, and that one has a lot of blade features, less so on the hilt, but that is an even less expensive katana and at least as fun as this one, and an excellent cutter as well. The point is, Romance of Men has come a long ways from when they first started sending out review samples and now. They are continuing to make improvements, and I really like to see that. So overall, I think this sword is worth your attention. The Surudoi, like I mentioned, is also worth your attention. But check it out. If you happen to like it, maybe order one. And that's going to wrap up this review. I want to say thank you to Romance of Men for sending me this katana to review, and thank you for watching. If you haven't yet, make sure you've hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, all that standard YouTube stuff. Until next time, Alien Tude out.